Spelljammer is a very interesting and unique setting that was introduced in AD&D. It got quite a lot of support, some video games and novels, but during the 3rd edition of D&D it was mostly forgotten. Sure, there was one or maybe even two Dragon magazine articles about it, and spelljammer.org, a fan site devoted to converting AD&D Spelljammer content to the 3rd edition, but it wasn't really enough. During the 4th edition of D&D, the setting was forgotten completely, as it was incompatible with the 4E cosmology. I don't know, maybe it's just my mental inertia or grumpiness, but I find the decision to rework D&D cosmology for the 4th edition to be one of the stupidest decisions ever made. If you are in the tabletop RPG hobby, you probably are aware of Wizards of the Coast publishing a 5E Spelljammer book. I took a look at it and it's terrible. Again, Wizards of the Coast reworked how the world works to make Spelljammer less unique and drained all the fun out of the setting. There were also some ridiculous controversies about the content, but I do not even want to talk about that silly stuff. Seriously, I think Wizards of the Coast haven't been deserving any support for many years already, but people still do support them. So what about trying to play Spelljammer using not D&D but a different system, such as GURPS? If you have watched my previous videos, you should know that I believe that GURPS does D&D better than D&D itself, but Spelljammer has its own specifics, such as, well, spelljamming. In Spelljammer, entire star systems are enclosed in huge crystal spheres that float in the flow, also known as phlogiston. Travel between the celestial bodies within the spheres is possible via spelljammers, vehicles, usually ships, outfitted with a spelljamming helm. Basically, this is a chair that allows the pilot and the ship become one. The ship is controlled mentally. Traveling between the spheres requires you to take a natural portal, open a portal through the sphere's wall, or phase through it. One question that pops up in the mind is what skills used to pilot a Spelljammer? Piloting high-performance spacecraft? Piloting contragraph? Personally, I think that due to the specific way of operating the vessel, it would be reasonable to introduce piloting Spelljammer skill, that is an IQ average instead of dexterity average skill, and that has no default. Crewmates, however, use crewmate flying sailor. To navigate in space, that is wild space if we were to use setting-specific terminology, use navigation space. To find crystal spheres in phlogiston, introduce the new navigation phlogiston specialty with no default. Here's another nuance of Spelljammers. For most of them, their speed depends not only on the local conditions, but also on something that is called ship rating. Ship rating, in turn, depends on the magical aptitude of the pilot in AD&D. In GURPS, I suggest using piloting Spelljammer skill instead, and only allow the skill to be learned by characters with magical or divine powers. Alternatively, you can base it on, for example, thaumatology. Also, I have another criticism, but this time not of the 5e Spelljammer book, but of the original AD&D one. Rules are all over the place. To understand how movement works and the mechanics of spelljamming, you'll have to jump between different chapters of the book. It is very difficult to make sense of it if you're not already familiar with the rules. And to become familiar with the rules, you have to make sense of them first, right? So here are the Spelljammer movement rules converted to GURPS and put in a single place. Spelljammers move differently depending on the circumstances. When being operated by a helmsman, they can fly in the atmosphere, through the wild space, or through the flow, also known as phlogiston. Spelljammers, based on naval vessel, may land on water. If they are to sail on water, they use the normal statistics for the ship of their class. When flying through the atmosphere, a Spelljammer has move 1/7 per ship rating. Thus, a ship with ship rating 4 will have move 4/28. Only ships capable of landing on water or land can do so and take off safely. Any ship can crash onto a planet or its ocean, but then taking off again is guaranteed to be a problem. Traveling in wild space in a straight line, spelljamming ships can attain high velocity relatively quickly, spanning the great emptiness between the planets in a short time. Upon making a turn or coming into the gravity field of another large body, the spelljammer helm automatically decelerates to a more manageable atmospheric speed. This sudden slowdown does not cause whiplash. Returning to the proper wild space speed requires leaving the gravity field and warming up the spelljammer helm for 2D minutes. For such objects as other ships, the gravity well usually extends to 1200 yards. This is a function of all spelljamming, regardless of the type of helm or owning race of the ship. A large body is any body of 10 tons or greater space displacement, 100 cubic yards, or a cube slightly less than 14 feet on a side with an effective size modifier of +4, which includes most spelljamming ships, planets, stars, and other worthwhile celestial bodies. A ship can travel 100 million miles per day regardless of its ship rating, size, or the piloting spelljammer skill of the character manning the helm. This means that any spelljammer can travel 1 astronomical unit per day. When using phlogiston, the spelljammer ships can attain even greater velocities. These speeds have defied measurement since the phlogiston is without permanent landmarks or markers. Time is the only constant. In general, it takes 2D times 10 days to travel from one crystal sphere to another. The sphere reached is random unless a successful navigation phlogiston roll was made to find a particular sphere. Unless the helmsman has a locator device that costs $2,000 and weighs 5 pounds, this roll is made at -5 for no equipment. Some spheres are unreachable from others due to the flow itself, and travelers must go through a third or fourth sphere in order to reach their goal. A ship's last port of call determines which spheres it can move to. Port of call is the sighting or landing within a crystal sphere. Ships in the flow slow down to atmospheric speed when they encounter other bodies such as ships or rogue planets, but this does not affect total travel time. That covers the movement rules, but we are still missing something important, the actual spelljammer helms that are used to enable spelljamming. A helm can be operated only by a character with magical or divine abilities. The character sitting at the helm acts as a living engine, providing the mystical power to move the ship through wild space and to perform some basic maneuvering as well. The better the piloting spelljammer skill of the pilot, the faster and further the ship can move. Each minor and major spelljammer helm allows the individual seated upon it to move a large mass through space, by means of channeling mystical energy directly into motive force. The power of the force is known as the ship's rating. A minor helm provides ship rating equal to piloting spelljammer skill divided by 4 rounded up, and a major helm provides ship rating equal to piloting spelljammer skill divided by 3 rounded up. As soon as the character sits on the helm and becomes aware of the ship, he becomes unable to use any of his magical or divine abilities for 24 hours. In effect, the helm drains the helmsman of all his supernatural powers the moment it is activated. Using a helm costs 1 FP per hour, but the helmsman can use his ER, magical or divine, to power it as well. The helmsman is aware of the damage to the hull as bright flashes of pain. Thus, damage to the hull imposes shock penalties to the helmsman's actions, and major wounds may stun or knock him out. An individual seated upon the helm can talk and act normally. The sensation of using the helm is akin to being immersed in warm water. As a result of the magical nature of the helm, the spelljamming character using the helm can see things around the ship as if he were standing on the deck. The ship becomes an extension of his body and responds to his demands in movement. The maneuverability of a ship is a reflection of both the spelljamming character's ability and the handling class of the ship. A minor helm can move a ship up to 50 tons. A major helm can move one up to 200 tons. Only one helm may be in service at a time, so backups are possible. A minor helm costs $250,000 and weighs 80 pounds. A major helm costs $750,000 and weighs 160 pounds. It can be installed on any vehicle or structure, typically a naval vessel, but there are Spelljammer hulls specially made for traveling in wild space. The minimum weight of the hull is 1 ton. I should note that these costs and weights are just numbers I pulled out of my ass, not something I calculated using a formula. Feel free to change them if you want. In the description I will link a blog post that has all these rules and additional rules for other types of helms, series helms, pool helms, etc. As for the Spelljammers themselves, just use existing ships from GURPS basic set, GURPS low-tech, GURPS vehicles, transports of fantasy, the upcoming GURPS vehicles biremes and triremes, or whatever other sorts. That work for groundling ships, but the proper specialized Spelljammer hulls should not be too difficult to convert. I might write some of them up in the future and post them on my blog. If you're playing a Spelljammer game, you're likely to experience vehicular combat. There are vehicular combat rules in the GURPS basic set, but there are some alternatives. First, instead of starting up Spelljammers as vehicles, you can use GURPS spaceships to build the vehicles and use the combat system from that book. GURPS Spaceships 7, Divergent and Paranormal Tech should be useful for you then. Personally, I really dislike GURPS spaceships. It just feels very non-GURPS, if that makes any sense. I haven't checked it in much detail, but GURPS Traveler Interstellar Wars has another spaceship combat system. GURPS Vehicles for the 3rd edition also has a different vehicle combat system. Mylanka, who is probably the most active and prolific GURPS blogger, has a revised and simplified space combat system on his blog, and an alternative action vehicular combat system based on the chase rules from GURPS Action 2 exploits. I will link the article index and the action vehicular combat in the description. As for equipment, monsters and races, I got most of them covered on my blog. There is nothing extraordinarily difficult to convert in Spelljammer, so you should be fine. And that's it for this video, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.